we all have those friends, I'm sure, that are brutally honest with us sometimes. And we don't want to hear that all the time. But, you know, to have that sort of cropping up every now and then, this sort of place that they would go to, you know, the Swan pub, where they could kind of vent their, you know, experiences of relationships and all that kind of stuff. It was, yeah, it was like being down the pub yourself, really. They were my favorite kind of scenes, really, with Phil and Simon, just because of the humor and the sort of slick sort of banter, and ultimately someone who you think talks like he doesn't give a shit. Sorry, talks like he doesn't, you know, care. But ultimately he's got his back and he's looking out for him, which is.
Phil is, yeah, I mean, a lot of people sort of, you know, the Phil character, reviewers, bloggers, editors, people like Phil. Like Phil. There's a story about, so Phil is sort of based on my best friend Phil.
Where did you come up with the name?
Oh, there is a story involved in that. So when I was right at the beginning, I kind of knew who Simon was going to be, but I knew there were other things that I needed to be said, which needed to be said with another voice, a more caustic voice. And so I came up with this idea, and I thought, this guy needs to be an arsehole. This guy, he basically needs to be, just needs to be a bit crass. And so I wrote to 3 close male friends. I wrote to Alex, and I wrote to Paul, and I wrote to Phil. I wrote in one email, and I said, look, I'm just collecting some ideas about, need to get some ideas about an arsehole. And my friend Alex, who's met the real Phil once, said, well, why don't you base it on Phil? He's an arsehole. And Paul, who's met Phil once, and Phil stole a load of chicken out of a curry that he was cooking, said, well, why don't you base it on Phil, because he's an arsehole? And Phil wrote back to me and said, well, why don't you base it on me? I'm an arsehole. And I said, is it okay if I call him Phil? He said, yeah, go for it. So that's how
I think that's really interesting, because it is so real. You know, that character, he's outrageous at times, but it obviously comes from a place where it's sort of observational humor for you then, maybe, you know, and that.
Yeah, I mean, Phil doesn't say anything that Phil has ever said.
No.
And the other thing is, he always, when Phil and I talk about it, he says, and the you character. And by the you character, he means Simon. He thinks that Simon is based on me and that Phil is based on him.
That's not the case.
Dear reader, dear listener, that is not the case. That is not the case.